But when you were indicted, you used Oscar Goodman as your attorney. Is that correct? And I think what's interesting is we've had Oscar probably do 25 episodes with us, and he's always talking about his perspective. And unfortunately, none of his clients are either alive or around to disagree with what he said. But can you give us some insight on, one, how you met Oscar, and two, working with him and how that was?
The first time I was indicted, when I came here in '82, I was part of what was known at the time as a computer group. And then in January of 1985, we were indicted, myself and, 14, 15 other people throughout the United States. And the authorities mistakenly thought we were a group of organized bookmakers that were affiliated with organized crime, which was untrue on both accounts. We were organized bettors.
Right.
And they had never seen organized bettors before, and because of the amount of money that we were winning, they just assumed that we must be organized bookmakers. And when we got raided in January of 1985, was the day before the Super Bowl, I had to get an attorney. So I called my attorney in Kentucky. His name was Frank Haddad, and Frank was a great lawyer. He's legendary, and he was the former president of the American Trial Lawyers Association. I didn't know any lawyers in Las Vegas, and he recommended Oscar Goodman. So I went down, and he called Oscar. I went down and introduced myself. We met. We reached a business agreement, and Oscar became my attorney. And a couple weeks later, every time I pick up the paper, Oscar was in the paper, and he was representing some pretty high-profile people, and the majority of them were allegedly mob people. And I thought...
Thank you for saying allegedly. Otherwise he would have corrected you on that.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. But anyway, I thought, man, I've got myself a real high profile here because I'm betting on sports. And although Oscar is a great guy, great lawyer, and we became great friends, I consider him a great friend today and a great lawyer, my profile had been elevated substantially. But anyway, over a period of time, I think the decision was made initially to toss this case. They realized that we weren't booking and that we were betting, and the case initially went away. And I'd already paid Oscar a nice retainer fee at the time, and 4.5 years go by, actually longer than that, 4 years, 11 months goes by. And at the very end, before the statute of limitations runs out, they decide that they were going to indict us, and we got indicted. And we got charged with being part of a criminal conspiracy conspiring to bet. Now think about that for a second. Conspiring to bet in Las Vegas. And there was something that happened in the meantime. There was an FBI agent who approached me and he wanted to talk to me. And initially I wouldn't talk to him, and it became actually aggravating. And I told Oscar about it. Oscar had called his superior and told him, don't let this guy come around anymore. And then all at once, there was a guy here who was an investigative reporter at the time. His name was Ned Day. And Ned and I were friends. And I used to go to boxing matches with Ned. And Ned liked to bet on sports too. And I'd give Ned a few games to bet on. And Ned was living with a gal that he was dating. And her roommate was the guy was the head of the strike force here at the time was a guy named Larry Levitt, who became a federal magistrate and may still be a federal magistrate. But anyway, Ned's girlfriend was living with, at that time, Larry Levitt's girlfriend. And Ned came back to me and he said, look, they're not going to indict anyone for this. They realize that you were doing nothing but betting now. You weren't booking. And if you'll talk to this FBI agent, he's only been on the force for a few months, and explain to him the difference between bookmaking and betting, this will go away. So I went down and I discussed it with Oscar, and Oscar thought it was the worst idea in the world. You can't talk to an FBI agent. And of course I was young, I was naive, and at the time, which I'm no longer naive, the advice he gave me was 100% correct. But anyway, I decided I was going to meet with a guy and I was going to educate him on the difference between bookmaking and betting, and I did. And the case went away, and I thought I'd been successful. Anyway, a number of things that came up with the judge that was currently on the case. And there were some things that took place and a motion was filed to recuse the judge. And then Oscar learned that I talked to this FBI agent, which he was infuriated that I didn't take his advice and I talked to an FBI agent. Although I didn't tell the FBI agent anything, I got nothing out of it.
Yeah.
I got zero out of it. I made it very clear when I talked to him, I wanted nothing out of it. I wanted nothing for myself or my family because I didn't want to view to be an informant. I was strictly here there to educate you on the difference between bookmaking and betting. As you can see, eventually I ended up being indicted along with my wife, so you can see what I got out of it. I got nothing out of it. But it didn't make any difference. Oscar was upset because I'd met with the FBI agent when he told me not to, and at the time, as you can imagine, Oscar had some real negative experiences with the federal law enforcement. So the decision was made in the 11th hour to switch attorneys, and we all agreed to it. And I hired Rick Wright, who represented us in that trial, and we went to that trial. We were exonerated there also, and the truth came out in the trial. And it was actually, if it had been a fight, they would have stopped it. They put the FBI agent on the stand. There was all kinds of things that came out. Anyway, it was just a comedy of errors on their part.
You're right.
And before the trial, they had offered you a plea deal to get your wife out of any of the charges at the time, and then she stood by your side saying, we need to fight this.
I was charged with 121 counts, and my wife, what had happened, it's hard to believe today because you got legalized sports betting in the majority of the United States. I lived in Rancho Bel Air. And early one morning, I've been playing poker that night. Early one morning, the FBI came to our house and arrested my wife and myself. They handcuffed us and put leg irons on us, and they took us out in front of our neighbors. And I looked and saw my wife Susan and the handcuffs and the leg irons. And then so we go down, and then they're going to indict her and myself. And we were given an ultimatum. I could plead guilty to those charges. And they would drop my wife out of the indictment. And we had that conversation at Oscar's office with Oscar and with Rick Wright. And I was ready to do anything to get my wife out of this because, I mean, I think most men would do whatever they had to do to protect their wives, although I hadn't done anything wrong. And my wife herself, she said, let's go talk about this. So we went and we sat down and we had a discussion. She said, look, we haven't done anything wrong, and they're going to put somebody in jail for betting on ball games. She said, I just don't believe it. So we went back and we refused their deal, and sure enough, I got indicted along with my wife. She sat in federal court with me every day through that trial, and the investigation began in late 84. They raided us in 85. We got indicted in 1990. The statute of limitations was almost completely out, and we didn't go to court till 1992. So from 1984, the end of 84, until 2016, I had some type of either indictment or legal proceeding with someone. Yeah.
You're just reading your book and your stories from growing up in Louisville to dealing with the law here. I don't want to say you're a tough guy, but you've clearly been through a lot and withstood it all. But reading the book, it sounds like there was, and we try to talk about the characters of Old Vegas here a little bit. It sounds like there was one guy that was even scary to you, and that was Spilatro. Couldn't you have called Oscar and told him to leave you alone? Didn't work like that?
No.
I think the first time you met was in Oscar's office.
That's correct. Yeah.